Yes, Saida, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first Friday CME series. I'm Dr. Saida Rukshida, the Honorary Secretary of Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry, and it's a pleasure to have all of you all, my EC office bearers, my chairpersons, speakers and expert commentators, and most of all the delegates present today and who are watching us live. First Friday CME series is an initiative by IAPP. It's a curated open access educational series supported by unrestricted grant, and from today's session is brought to us by Arena Life Sciences. At this point, it's an honor and a privilege to welcome Dr. Parmod Kumar from Chandigarh, who's the Vice President of Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry, to welcome all of us and to give some opening remarks. Dr. Sir.
Okay, thank you, Saida, and very good evening to each one of you. And I hope and I pray that each one of us should remain fine during the third wave or COVID wave. And this Friday CME is a great initiative of IABP, and I attended the previous program, and it is quite an enriching experience. This today's topic, as far as the today topic is concerned, this is a kind of an overview on Valproate and by Anil Kakunje. And I know Anil for a long time. And in fact, when I was the General Secretary of Indian Association of Private Psychiatry, we had a research project with their institute, and which some publications have already taken place on that. And I hope Dr. Neil is going to talk about that. And so I'm quite optimistic about the kind of a research evidences, the latest evidences on that he's going to bring forth. You know, today anyways is a very special day for me, because today I have completed my 22nd year of a private practice in Chandigarh. So this is a special day for me. So when I was doing residency and from 93 to 96, and then came my senior residency. So Valproate came. So lithium was the drug of choice for for all kind of a bipolar disorders, which still is there, is still a gold standard for treatment. So but when carbamazepine and followed by Valproate come, it gave us a tremendous amount of a kind of a confidence and a choice that this is something which is going to change the future of the people with bipolar affective disorders. The molecule as such has been in science, I would say, for almost, you can say, about 60 years or so. 1960s it came up in the research, and followed by the clinical practice. As far as I remember, we started using in the late of 90s or early of 20s, I would say, in this millennium year. Valproic acid, valproate, divalproate, and extended release. These are the kind of the common terminology which each one of us use in clinical practice. But if you really look at the indications, I'm going to make a very, very brief introduction on this. And so this is a molecule which has been used for the treatment of acute mania, mixed episode mania, and then there are certain indications which goes beyond the bipolar, like epilepsy, for which actually it has been designed for treatment of epilepsy. And then migraine prophylaxis, we have seen people using Valproate for all kind of headaches, especially for migraine prophylaxis. And there are certain off-label indications for which Valproate has been used all throughout the world, I would say. Then management of agitation, anger, aggression, and it has also been used. There are many research evidences to use it in schizophrenia, especially with the positive symptoms, and there are evidences to support the improvement with that, although the evidences are not that strong. So when we then I have used quite a lot of this molecule in alcohol dependence syndrome also, and wherein there is an existence of bipolar disorder, comorbid disorders, along with alcohol dependence and relapse prevention. This has been a kind of a great molecule for that purpose. There is one particular area. There is one particular category of people, like reproductive age group people, pregnancy, lactation. That is one area. That is one group of people who have, a lot of these people have the bipolar disorder, and there we cannot use this particular molecule because of the teratogenicity, and there are other kind of effects which happens during this period of time. So I think this is a molecule which has a great promising result. Few things which have always worried me during my clinical practice of these 22 years in private practice and 6 years before that is the side effect profile of this particular drug. And I have seen weight gain is one of the very major concerns with this molecule. Then came the hair loss, then lipid profile derangements, metabolic syndromes of different kind, and sexual side effect. Plenty of patients who are on this molecule, they have reported sexual side effect with this molecule. But overall, we have a molecule which is quite promising in the prevention and maintenance phase of a bipolar affective disorder. So this is a very, very brief intro to the topic. And for this particular topic, we have an excellent speaker and very knowledgeable chairpersons and the commentators. And I hope the next few minutes are going to be very, very enriching for each one of us. So over to the chairpersons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Parmod. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce the chairs today. We'll start with Dr. Janvi Kedare. She's been my teacher. She was my first lecturer, and she's the additional professor at Nair Hospital, which is a center of eminence and has been also a COVID center since the last couple of years as well. So a huge amount of experience under her belt, an excellent teacher, beautiful smile. That always kind of makes you at ease, and a knowledge that's something that she loves teaching, and all her students are going to vouch for her and swear by her teachings. Our next chairperson is Dr. Nitin Gupta. He's an office bearer of Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry. He's been very, very active for a number of years in education in all of our societies and has worked tirelessly for all of us. We know that he's a senior psychiatrist from Chandigarh, has an excellent practice both in private and as a keen teacher, and he's one who's also curated the session today. Welcome, Dr. Nitin Gupta, and I'm going to hand it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rukshita. It's a pleasure today to be chairing this session, the first session of 2022. And additionally, it's a pleasure to be chairing it where Anil is going to be speaking, Dr. Anil Kakonje. As Dr. Pramod mentioned, I think I have also been associated with him for the same period through IAPP, and known him to be a very diligent and committed researcher and a clinician. And, is currently the head of the Department of Psychiatry at Janepoya Medical College, Mangalore. He did his DPM from NIMHANS and MD from KMC Manipal, where he was adjudged the best outgoing student and received the gold medal in MD there. He's a prolific researcher, as I had already mentioned, having authored 4 books and written chapters also. Amongst these books, the popular has been 1,000 plus MCQs, 1555 plus MCQs in psychiatry and psychology and culture-bound syndromes. He's also one of the editors of the Indian Psychiatric Update series by IPS Southzone and the deputy editor of the Journal of Psychiatry Spectrum. He has nearly 75 publications in peer-reviewed journals and has received research grants of approximately 40 lakhs. He's also been awarded various times. And as Dr. Pramod mentioned, he's got a keen interest in this particular molecule because he's carried out extensive research over a period of 3 years on this. With this brief introduction, I welcome Dr. Anil and for his presentation. But before that, I'll pass on to my co-chairperson for further introductions, please. Dr. Janvi.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. First of all, at the outset, let me thank Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry for inviting me here as a chairperson, and especially Rukshida, not only for inviting me, but for your kind words while introducing me. Rukshida has been extremely active. We all know that she's been very active in the field for the past so many years, and is a very enthusiastic leader in the field of mental health of today. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm sure all of us are keen to hear what Dr. Kakunje has to tell us about an important molecule which we use every day in our practice. Following his speech, we have an equally eminent person who would be giving expert comments, and that is Dr. Hema Tharoor. She has done her DPM and DNB from Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, and is a consultant psychiatrist at Apollo Spectra Hospital, is one of the top psychiatrists of Chennai, and has been associated with SCAR for the last 11 years at least. So I think we have two distinguished and very appropriate persons to talk about the molecule, and so I invite Dr. Anil Kakunje to begin with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the generous introduction. So I am really humbled. So I'll start the screen share. Just give me a minute. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Yes, you're good to go.
Yeah. So firstly, New Year greetings to all. And I'll start with the acknowledgement first, not the title. So firstly, thanks to the office bearers of IABP, the CME coordinators, chairpersons and experts. A special thanks to Dr. Pramod, who I know for many years now, Dr. Nitin Gupta and Rukshida Saida for this particular session. And thanks to the audience, from whom I am sure I will also learn many things at the end of the program. And it will be a good knowledge sharing exercise. With this, give me about 30-35 minutes. So I understand online programs are, too long programs are not much appreciated. So we'll try to finish it within half an hour or so. One second, I think it's, yes. So coming to the disclosures, first one, I may have shares of companies manufacturing or marketing valproate or its alternative products. I declare there are no financial disclosures directly or indirectly related to today's program or presentation. The whole exercise is not to promote a molecule or to discourage the use of the molecule. It is basically a critical evaluation and to openly discuss the current status of the molecule so that listeners and audience can take an informed decision while prescribing the drug the next time. So coming to today's topic, update on valproate. So first question is, why update? So valproate was first synthesized in 1882 and it came to medical use serendipitously in 1962. So it was there for almost about 70-80 years. It was initially brought as a solvent. And in 1962, luckily someone discovered that it has anticonvulsant property. And since about late 1960s, it is there in the market and now is one of the foremost anti-epileptic prescribed. So majority of our say data is mainly of valproate use and anti-epileptic. It was much later you started being used as a mood stabilizer. So we get a lot of data with the use of valproate as an anti-epileptic. Coming to the next part of the title, why valproate? Why did I choose valproate? So one is we should know about valproate because it is in the WHO list of essential medicines. One, it is now a generic formulation, so it is very cheaply available, widely available. Everyone is using, and it's with the experience of valproate with us is for several decades now. So we need to know what is happening with this molecule over the period of years. In 2019, it was the 114th most prescribed drug in the US among all the drugs. So it is almost nearing 100 now, probably. So it is even the top 100 prescribed drugs, and probably for the psychiatrist, it stands maybe in the top 5 or say, I'm sure within top 10. Personally, for me, I don't think there would be a day where I have not written valproate. I'm sure many of you during practice days, there wouldn't be any days where we have not prescribed valproate. So we need to know in detail about valproate. It is the most common prescribed anti-epileptic, and it is one of the most common mood stabilizer used for psychiatrists. And the other thing is it is available in all forms. It is available as a tablet, it's available as a syrup, and it's available intravenously also. So there is a molecule. Here is the molecule which has been with us for several decades, very commonly used in psychiatric practice as well as in seizures, which is generally comorbid with the psychiatric illnesses. So with this background, we'll go to the molecule per se, valproate. To start with, valproic acid is a branched short chain fatty acid. So valproate ion is the active principle, and sodium valproate is the sodium salt. So this is the starting point of our valproate discussion. Then much later came divalproates, which is most commonly used now. Divalproates is actually valproate semi-sodium, is actually a combination of sodium valproate and valproic acid in 1:1 ratio. So divalproates is currently available in plain form, entry coated forms, even in sprinkles, and delayed use as an OD preparation. So we have various forms of valproate now. You have plain valproate, you have valproate chrono, which came much later with a little longer action. And now we have divalproates and even OD valproate, divalproates. So we have moved from plain valproate to divalproates over several decades. Next question is, then came magnesium valproate. So what is the difference between sodium valproate and magnesium valproate? So magnesium valproate is the magnesium salt of valproate, and it came with a bank. So people thought combining magnesium, seizure control is much better. Theoretically, it should work much better for people with seizure disorder and for people with the migraine. But somehow the theoretical thing is not translated into practice much. So I have discussed personally with many neurologists also. So the practical prescribing magnesium valproate is not as common with sodium valproate. One is the cost is little high. The efficacy theoretically is about maybe 5-10% better, but then it is not much, say the practical utilization is nothing great compared to sodium valproate. So, but the cost is much about say 20-25% more compared to sodium valproate. So it has really not clicked very higher in the market compared to sodium valproate, but theoretically and practically it works almost the same, sodium valproate and magnesium valproate. And however, the most of the prescriptions are for sodium valproate. Magnesium valproate came about, I think, 7-8 years back, but then the prescription is not that great, and probably companies are also not promoting sodium magnesium valproate much. But theoretically, probably it has an edge in seizure disorder and in management of migraine. But from a psychiatry point of view, it is almost roughly the same. There is no much difference between sodium and magnesium valproate. Coming to the mechanism of action. So it increases concentration of GABA levels, especially in the brain, And this mechanism of action probably is implicated in management of seizure disorder, and it helps in the initiation and transfer of seizure potentials. So it increases GABA levels, and this is one thing which has strong anti-epileptic activity. Next mechanism of action is blocking voltage-gated sodium channels. This mechanism of action also helps in preventing seizures, and to some extent even potassium and calcium channels, but predominantly it is sodium channels. The third mechanism of action is inhibiting histone deacetylases. This mechanism of action probably is used as an anti-cancer drug or anti-mitotic activity or cytotoxic for say cancer cells. So this is one thing which probably has some implication for using sodium valproate as an anti-cancer drug. And the last mechanism of action is modulation of dopaminergic and serotonergic transmission. Probably this is one which, along with GABAergic and NMDA antagonist action, helps in mood stabilizing. So apart from all these things, it is an antagonist of androgen and progesterone receptors. I'll come to this little later when we discuss PCOD, and it suppresses estrogen concentrations. So it has some anti-androgen properties, probably having implication in some side effects. So predominant action of valproate is increases GABA levels, sodium channel blockage, and inhibiting histone deacetylases. Coming to the dosage, so if you look at plain valproate and chrono tablets, it is available in 200 mg, 300 mg, and 500 mg tablets. It's available in syrup form also, and roughly the dosage is about 200 mg for 5 ml. We now have divalproix tablets, which is available in 125 milligrams, 250 milligrams, 500 milligrams, 750 and 1000 mg. So you can manage the whole day's valproate dosage with only one drug and one tablet. And the syrup formulation of divalproix is also available, which is colorless, odorless now, and it's available in 250 milligram for 5 ml and 500 milligram per 5 ml. So we have very wide range of dosage options and easy conversion from valproate to divalproix. And the starting dosage is generally about 10 milligram per kg body weight, either OD or a divided dosage. And it can go up to about 60 milligram per kg body weight. So you have a wide dosage options. So you can start with around, for an adult, about 500 mg and move up to quite a heavy dosage. So depending on the tolerability and side effects. Next, something interesting about sodium valproate, serum level testing. So we are quite familiar with the lithium level testings, but we hardly use therapeutic valproate testings in clinical psychiatric practice. It is probably used a little more by neurologists. So you have serum levels, we need to take the trough levels. Generally, the early morning blood sample is collected before taking the tablet, how we do for lithium, and the trough levels are taken. And the normal level is somewhere between, say, 50 to 100 micrograms per ml. But it is not the problem with the serum monitoring is it like in valproate, like in lithium, it is generally not correlated well with say practical improvement seen with clinical changes. So therapeutic drug monitoring in psychiatry is not routinely done, but however, the usage is there to check. One is whether the person is taking the medicines. So it helps in ensuring adherence. And if you suspect someone is not taking the tablet, you can do a serum testing and ensure that. And probably if people have taken overdosage and to check for toxicity, or you suspect toxicity with sodium valproate, you can do serum levels and give a rough idea about what is the level in the body, or with the treatment, whether it is improving in toxicity stages or people have overdose and so on. But routinely not commonly used. But there is something with serum testing and of valproate is an advantage. You can do even valproate testing for saliva, and it is quite well correlates well with the serum levels also. So you can actually do a non-invasive testing of saliva levels of valproate and then check whether the person is taking or not. it is quite helpful, especially for our patients who sometimes you have difficulty in taking the blood sample, or especially in children or people with mental retardation and subnormal intelligence, where cooperation for blood testing is little difficult. Even you can do a salivary valproate testing, which is quite helpful. Next, coming to usages of valproate, Dr. Pramodin during the initial introduction covered quite a bit. So predominantly it is used, one is it started with the epilepsy. It is used for almost all epilepsies. In fact, my teacher used to say that you have a doubt of which kind of seizure it is and you are unsure and you need to give an anti-epileptic, the choice is sodium valproate. So it has a wide coverage. It covers from JTCS to non-convulsive seizures like absence, and therapeutically also it has a wide dosage range. So epilepsy is one thing where it is used the foremost. Second, coming to psychiatry usages, bipolar disorder. As you all know, it is one of the first line mood stabilizers, both in acute treatment as well as maintenance treatment. I'll go into the details little later. And the third usage, which came somewhere in second half of 90s, is migraine prophylaxis. So you have valproate as a first line, one of the foremost treatment for epilepsies, bipolar disorder, and migraine prophylaxis. Additional usages is one is psychosis, schizophrenia. Also, it is tried. Schizoaffective disorders, especially in controlling the episodes and managing the affective component of the disorder. It is used in anger management, impulse control disorders, and recently has been tried even in cancers. And there may be several others off-label usages of sodium valproate. So we are looking at a wide range of usage across specialties. So you have medicine people using, you have neurologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, ENT specialists, general practitioners. So a whole lot of bunch of doctors using sodium valproate, something which we need to know in detail. So coming to the first usage, I'll keep it a little brief on epilepsy. So as I've already covered, it's a broad spectrum anti-epileptic, and it is used for tonic-clonic seizures, absence seizures, used for myoclonic seizures as first line drug. So you have any of these seizures, it is one of the first line choice. And a second line choice for partial seizures, infantile spasms. So, and if you are unsure of what seizure it is, or people have more than one kind of seizures, choice sodium valproate. And even in status epilepticus, you have an intravenous choice of giving an antiepileptic, you can give sodium valproate. So seizure, sodium valproate can be easily thought of as a treatment option. And many of our patients, especially children with the comorbid epilepsies, psychiatric illnesses with comorbid epilepsies, alcohol people with having alcohol problem with comorbid epilepsies, sodium valproate is one of the choice which you can easily make. Coming to our interest, bipolar disorders. So the approval for usage of sodium valproate in bipolar disorder came in 1995. And since then, probably it has been a tough given a tough competition for lithium, which is and was considered as the gold standard, and now giving a tough competition for lithium as the frontline mood stabilizer. So it is used in treatment of acute manias and maintenance treatment of bipolar disorders. So in both phases it is used, and it has a better action in controlling manic relapses, probably a little less effective in controlling depressive episodes where lithium scores a little better. But it has several advantages in controlling mixed episodes, people with comorbid substance abuse, bipolar disorder with rapid cycling. It is one of the drug of choice, and lithium non-responders, or along with the other mood stabilizers, along with lithium also. So you have a wide range of application of sodium valproate in bipolar disorders, right from having only one bipolar disorder with comorbid illness, special type of bipolar disorders, along with lithium and along with other mood stabilizers. So a wide range of usages in bipolar disorder, both in acute phase and maintenance phase. The next usage is in migraine. So it is valproate is used in migraine prophylaxis. The approval came after bipolar disorder somewhere in 1996. And the mechanism of action which helps in which gives effectiveness in migraine is it increases the GABA levels. It suppresses migraine-related events in the cortex, perivascular parasympathetics, and trigeminal nucleus, which are the trigger points for migraine. So it helps in say prophylaxis and preventing next migraine episodes. So migraine is also one of the comorbid medical problem which we frequently see in day-to-day clinical practice. So many times you need to combine drugs with when people have one or two illnesses, and if people have comorbid migraine, valproate becomes a good choice because it covers migraine prophylaxis and it has some actions for the primary psychiatric disorder. So you have one drug which can cover both. In that sense, so usage of valproate in migraine, it is quite useful. Next, valproate for cancer and say HIV. So it has been tried, and mechanism of action, why it is tried on cancer, it inhibits class 1 and class 2 histone deacetylases. So this mechanism of action is used in say cancer control, and it has shown some anti-neoplastic effects of tumor cells, and mainly tried in breast cancer, prostate cancer, leukemias, and so on. And it also has been tried in HIV-infected individuals. Valproate has quite a good usage on many of these illnesses. Not a frontline drug, but majority of the time when it is comorbid illnesses and you have any of these primary illnesses along with the cancers, so it is being tried for as an add-on therapy for many of these illness. Coming to the side effects, because I think as psychiatrists, many of us are very familiar with all these indications, but we need to monitor the side effects, and that is where we need to check whether we have any other better option compared to valproate when there is a need to control the side effects. Coming to the common side effects, I think majority of us are aware of the common side effects, the GI-related problems with valproate, tremors, which sometimes is quite disturbing when you give valproate, and is controlled by giving, say, propranolol when you have valproate-induced tremors. People complain of feeling tiredness or not being very active when people are given valproate, and that is one thing which sometimes is a little disturbing. People report of a kind of little sedation with the drug. Weight gain, as Dr. Parmod initially in his remarks mentioned, is one of the troubling problems when you give valproate, and that can actually cause a lot of disturbance, especially for young people, ladies, younger generation, people who don't want to put on weight. And that's one disabling side effect which is reported during the initial days of starting the drug, and sometimes can be quite severe also. And people can gain even somewhere between, say, 2 to 3 kgs to at least about 8 to 10 kgs. And management becomes an issue. Pedal edema at times is an issue. People report of pedal edema with valproate. And common other side effects or minor ones are raised liver enzymes and irregular menstrual period. These are the common side effects which people report you need to watch for when you initially start valproate. And sometimes these may need some additional drugs to manage things like, or some non-pharmacological intervention needs to be done, managing the drug, giving it a night dose, or combining with some other drug to reduce the minor side effects with valproate. Tremors may require propranolol. If someone reports of sedation, they can take it a little earlier. Weight gain may require some, say, non-pharmacological interventions like exercise, controlling fat, stopping other comorbid drugs or exercises. And these require some minor adjustments so that a person continues to take the drug, ensure compliance, and see that it doesn't become very disabling. The more problematic thing is when people develop severe side effects. There may be many postgraduates in the audience, so I just want to ask one question. So, which vitamin is called as vitamin H? So, vitamin H, heard of this? So vitamin H is actually biotin. So you have something H is for hair and something biotin is related to hair. So coming to the little rarer and disabling problems of valproate side effects, hair changes is one of them, and one of our study was also on this. So thinning of hair, hair fall, alopecia, hair discoloration, curling of hair. These are also some times reported with the valproate, and hair fall can sometimes be very problematic. And it is a dose-related side effects, and it is because of the poor biotinase activity related to the action of valproate. And many times it is reported that it is because of deficiency of several of these smaller vitamins and minerals, which deficiency of which can cause hair changes and cause side effects of hair fall with sodium valproate. So it interferes, especially if people have problems with biotin, zinc, magnesium deficiency can cause hair changes, and that can cause sometimes disabling problem, and then we need to discontinue valproate. So the other serious side effect is with hyperammonemia. So this can sometimes be really problematic, and especially when people are on high doses. So 1 in 2,000 people, 1 in 20,000 people can develop hyperammonemia with valproate. I sometimes feel it could be more common when you actually look for it. So it is an idiosyncratic side effect, and it's not dose related. It is characterized by confusion, cognitive slowing, drowsiness, and people can present with delirium. So people on, say, fairly good dose of valproate sometimes can start even in the early stage when you start valproate. So hyperammonemia can cause delirium kind of picture, and it can be really problematic and at times really fatal. So what are the risk factors to develop hyperammonemia, especially when people are on a lot of other drugs? Polypharmacy is one, and people have urea cycle disorders, and people with kidney problems, poor nutrition, only vegetarian diet, and people with developmental delay, especially people with poor nutrition because of the developmental delay. These are some of the risk factors why people develop hyperammonemia with sodium valproate. And the treatment for that is giving L-carnitine, and L-carnitine, you can reduce the dose of valproate, and if sometimes you may actually have to stop the sodium valproate also. So L-carnitine actually helps in improving the confusion related to hyperammonemia. So how it works is something which we need to analyze. So you have valproate, and this valproate actually cause inhibition of few of the enzymes related to the cycle related to urea, and valproate along with carnitine, it inhibits the carnitine in the urea cycle. So inhibition of valproate in carnitine cycle leads to accumulation. The problem comes when valproate is combining with carnitine, and that causes inhibition of enzymes in the urea cycle. So you have problems in excretion of this, and the carnitine increases. So there is a decrease in carnitine. So you need to substitute carnitine so to remove the delirium because of valproate, and that is because of hyperammonemia. Generally about 3 to 5 days of carnitine, substitution of carnitine. So carnitine comes in about 500 mg tablet, and you will have to give a little high dose of carnitine to remove the hyperammonemia because of valproate. The other side effects of valproate are hepatotoxicity. So it is more common in very young children, especially when it is given for seizure disorders. So there may be minimal to high rise of liver enzymes, and people can present with jaundice, hepatitis, and it requires frequent monitoring actually of valproate when you are giving valproate liver enzymes. So a 6-monthly monitoring of valproate enzymes, liver function test would be actually good to see that people don't develop any hepatotoxicity and raised liver enzymes as a side effect of valproate. The other side effect is blood related, so related to hematopoietic system. So people can have petechiae, hematoma, bruising, epistaxis, and so on. And thrombocytopenia is also one of the side effects when you give valproate. So people can have partial thromboplastin time elevation, decreased fibrinogen levels, and prolonged prothrombin time. So people can sometimes present with bruising, hematoma, epistaxis, and so on. Some of the rare side effects are hyponatremia with valproate and pancreatitis with valproate. Another common problem sometimes is PCOD with valproate, and this can cause problematic menstrual irregularity, and especially ladies can develop acne, increased hair growth, weight gain, cystic ovaries, and fertility issues. So PCOD is one of the problem with the valproate, and sometimes conceiving is an issue, menstrual irregularity, and in males it can cause low sperm count, motility issues, and morphological changes of the sperms. So these are the side effects related to fertility in men and women when you take for a long time valproate. So what happens? So valproate, so it can cause hypothalamic dysfunction, especially antiepileptics, anabolic steroids, especially when it is combined, it can cause problematic at the hypothalamus level, and inducing metabolic dysfunction and weight gain. So antipsychotics, antiepileptics, and even with valproate, it can cause hyperinsulinemia and ovarian dysfunction. Valproate is one of the causes. It increases androgen excess and manifestation of PCOD kind of symptoms, especially ladies. It can really be problematic in conceiving. So monitoring, you need to monitor weight when you start valproate. So you need to check initially and probably at every visit, so that you advise them adequate exercises and weight control techniques, so that people don't put on a lot of weight. Pregnancy test for women in reproductive period, so that they don't conceive while they are on valproate. And it is better to have complete blood counts, differential counts, liver function tests at baseline and every 6 months while person is taking valproate. So coagulation test, ammonia levels can be done whenever necessary. You suspect any problems related to confusion and delirium and so on, you may have to check ammonia levels and probably coagulation tests and so on whenever needed. So in a special population, what are the say precautions you need to take? So valproate is metabolized in liver, hence caution in persons in liver diseases is very important, because it is predominantly metabolized in liver. Pregnancy, it is better to avoid giving valproate. So fetal valproate syndrome is one of the is seen when pregnant ladies are taking valproate and deliver babies. So babies can have neural tube defects, facial dysmorphism, cleft lip and cleft palates, so craniostenosis, cardiac and renal abnormalities, limb defects. So multiple anomalies of various body systems can be seen when the expected mothers are taking high dose of valproate. So it is better to avoid valproate in pregnancy. Lactation, also it is better to avoid, but then you can see the risk benefit ratio. Probably if it is absolutely essential, people can take and probably adjust the breastfeeding according to the peak levels. So it can be given, can be advised based on the need. And elderly, probably we need to reduce the dosage while giving valproate. What are the contraindications to give valproate? One is if someone is having a known hypersensitivity with valproate, people with chronic or acute liver dysfunction, because it is predominantly metabolized through liver. So liver dysfunction, it is better to reduce dosage or say avoid valproate. Urea cycle disorders, there is another illness which probably has a problem in excretion of valproate. People with pancreatitis, porphyrias, and mitochondrial disease. These are the conditions where probably need to avoid giving valproate. Coming to important interactions of valproate. So because in psychiatry, generally when valproate is generally given in bipolar disorders, so people will be on two, three other medications or 1 or 2 other mood stabilizers. So we need to be having caution when you are giving sodium valproate and know some details about interaction. So it is something which is highly protein bound. So serious interaction, one thing which people need to know is with lamotrigine, because we need to control the dosage when you are combining with lamotrigine. You actually need to reduce the dosage by almost half when you are combining lamotrigine and sodium valproate. And the dose escalation also needs to be very slow when you are combining with sodium valproate. Otherwise, people can have serious side effects, and it can lead to trouble. Carbamazepine also, it has a serious interaction with when you are combining sodium valproate, because it increases the excretion and people can have actually sometimes seizures. So you need to actually double the dosage when you are combining with carbamazepine. So it has interaction with the phenytoin, phenobarbital, and zidovudine. So these are the drugs which you need to be careful or avoid when you're combining valproate with the majority of few of these enzyme-inducing drugs. Zidovudine, it reduces the effect of zidovudine. So probably we need to hike the dose when you're combining sodium valproate with zidovudine. Oral contraceptives reduce valproate concentrations. So when you're someone, ladies, especially when they are on oral contraceptive pills, we need to hike a dose little of sodium valproate so that people don't develop withdrawal seizures and so on, or for mood stabilizing action. Valproate increases warfarin concentration and prolongs bleeding time. So we need to be watchful when people are on warfarin. These are the important interaction with the sodium valproate with few of the commonly used drugs. Coming to few of our studies on sodium valproate. So sodium valproate and hair. So hair loss, as I have already discussed earlier, is one of the common complaints with the valproate. So Dr. Nitin and Dr. Pramod were also along with us in the team in doing the study. So the study looked at valproate and its effect on hair. So hair fall is one of the common complaints, especially when you ask for hair fall, people start reporting of that they do have a hair fall. And it is mainly because of action on the telogen phase of the growth. So hair fall is can be a little problematic when you are giving valproate along valproate for especially for mood stabilizing long, especially ladies, you need to be watchful. The other thing with sodium valproate is contradictory. Another result is valproate sometimes is given even for hair growth. So applied topically, it can increase hair growth also. So there are studies and we have also looked into it that sometimes we don't know how exactly it is. Topical valproate sometimes applied can increase hair growth. So valproate has contradictory actions, probably hair loss when you take internally, and topically can cause hair growth too. The another study which we did from our center was looking at open label study of say acetazolamide for sodium valproate associated weight gain. So weight gain with the valproate is quite common. So we can give drugs like acetazolamide, which has been tried. So weight gain with sodium valproate, especially mainly during the initial 3 to 6 months, and we need to take care of the initial phase with the good non-pharmacological intervention to see that people don't put on a lot of weight when people are taking sodium valproate. And we tried whether we can give acetazolamide to try as a weight reducing agent for sodium valproate induced weight gain. So these are the few studies which we did in our center related to sodium valproate. So sodium valproate is a common drug which I think day in and day out we have used, and we need to be very familiar with all the possible indications, side effects, and what are the various strategies we can use to see that people are happy taking sodium valproate. So these are the references, and thank you. So I am open for the questions. It's over to the chairpersons.
Thank you, Dr. Kakunje. That was an excellent and a comprehensive review of sodium valproate, and I think very useful from a clinician's point of view, and also from the point of view of postgraduates who have less experience, and I'm sure need to know a lot about especially side effects and drug interactions. I think you have explained very beautifully the mechanism of various side effects also. Dr. Nitin Gupta, would you like to say anything? We have Dr. Hema Tharoor with us for her expert comments. So before her, would you like to say something, Dr. Gupta?
I think we've got some questions from the
Yes.
audience.
There are a lot of questions, in fact.
Yeah. So probably maybe we can take up the questions now and then have Dr. Tharoor's expert comments after that.
Yeah, sure. So we have a question from Dr. Niti Sapru. She has asked, what is your opinion with respect to pyridoxine for valproate-induced tremors?
Yeah. So tremors is one of the common problems. Pyridoxine for valproate-induced tremors.
Yeah.
Generally, propranolol probably would be a better choice for valproate-induced tremors. I think that controls it much better than pyridoxine. So, any other experience? Anyone else who uses pyridoxine? Any clinicians? Because I have not used pyridoxine much for tremors. Propranolol is something which gives fairly good results.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's propranolol rather than pyridoxine.
Yeah, I think we use propranolol rather than pyridoxine for tremors. And what is your take on valproate in primary amenorrhea?
Can I
Dr. Ambika.
Sorry,
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt. Dr. Anil, if you could stop your screen share, we can put the chairs and you on spotlight.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Yes, please carry on.
Right. So the question was whether valproate can be used in primary amenorrhea.
Valproate with the for primary amenorrhea.
Yeah.
See, starting shouldn't be a problem because we need to see why person already had amenorrhea. So, and it's not very common issue when someone is already on valproate. So starting shouldn't be a problem if someone already has, but then we need to know why person had that primary amenorrhea at the first place.
True. Considering the side effect of PCOD
Yes.
also.
So we need to know why person is already having.
Yeah.
But then it depends on the clinical stage, whether you have other options and so on.
Yes, right. Dr. Sandeep has asked, does hypomelanosis is seen with valproate just like hair loss and hair fall?
Hypermelanosis?
Yeah.
Not a common problem, I guess, with valproate. So hypermelanosis, with my reading, not a very common issue with valproate. Any other consultants or staffs who has any experience with this? Carbamazepine has a little more chance of this problem.
Okay, fine. I'm sure Dr. Tharoor can also add on if she has to, if she has experience in any of this or has an opinion on it. Okay, going to the next one. So what is your take on using valproate using as monotherapy for BPAD first episode than second generation antipsychotics in terms of response and efficacy? I think that's a very practical question.
Yes, I think many people do use this kind of strategy. So especially if it is a mild one and not very disabling, instead of giving antipsychotics, you actually can control an acute mania with only with valproate. And a mild one, sometimes just with the combination of some say benzodiazepines or a zolpidem kind of drug, you can manage mild to moderate mania only with valproate. An acute mania can be managed unless people have a severe psychotic symptom and you need to add other add-on drugs. So with benzodiazepines and a combination, a little jugglery with few and drugs here and there on SOS basis, we can manage a relatively mild to moderate mania or hypomania with only single dose of valproate.
Right. The corollary to it is about the loading dose of valproate in acute mania.
Yes.
So what would you like to say on that?
It depends, because sometimes when you give a loading dose, the side effect profile, it depends on the tolerability of the person. Some people initially are not very happy, and they don't tolerate the loading dose well. And people report of nausea and other kind of side effects. So, and if you can control the initial few days with some benzodiazepines, a slow hike would be a relatively better one to manage, say, acute mania.
So
Unless-
actually you're not recommending a loading dose, but you're saying it is better to give the patient what he's tolerating, probably start low and then increase the dose fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Starting-
think you have already
Yeah, you
dealt
can combine
with,
with
yeah.
benzodiazepine group of drugs for the other kind of symptoms,
yes,
so that you can slowly hike.
yes,
You are in a much safer ground rather than loading.
all right. Dr. Jaya Jacob has asked, can you explain on the use of acetazolamide for weight gain? I think, yeah.
Sorry, come again.
Can you explain the use of acetazolamide for weight gain?
Yeah. So generally, weight gain is a common problem with majority of the drugs, including valproate, and especially because we need to give it for a longer duration. And especially these people are young, so people don't want to put on weight. And the primary strategy should be all non-pharmacological intervention, exercises, and weight control techniques, and all sort of other things you do to see that person doesn't put on a lot of weight. Because generally the tendency is very high in the initial few months. And drug option for reducing weight should be reserved for the extreme kind of cases. And best option would be to combine drug which probably would help the person in that particular illness. Say something like topiramate and something like that, which probably has some say mood stabilizing action also, and probably may require may reduce weight or have some weight neutral say options. So that would actually cover as a mood stabilizer also, something like topiramate. So these are the various options available. So one of the drug which we did some trial is on acetazolamide. So it has helped. It has helped in the study, and the reduction of weight is somewhere between say about say 2 to 4 kgs. So that is one of the options. But then drug option should always be the last resort.
Yes, I think that's the take home, that drug option should be the last resort and other measures should be tried first. So Dr. Manisha has asked, please talk about re-challenging valproate in a patient who developed hyperammonemia.
Yes. So hyperammonemia, generally it is because of many other reasons. It would be nutritional, or it could be person is on many other drugs. So we need to see if you can correct all those things. So one option is you reduce the dose of valproate, and if valproate is actually benefited, you can do all other things and see that a person can tolerate valproate at a little much lesser dose. Majority of the time it is because of other things. It could be comorbid other medications or nutritional effects, and few other say comorbid drugs person is taking. These may be influencing why person is developing the problem. So the idea should be to reduce and remove other drugs and so on, and reduce the dose of valproate. But if it is inevitable and you seriously suspect that is the main culprit, then probably we have to stop. But then majority of the times, in my experience, with the reduced dosage, people manage well.
Thank you. Rukshida, I can go on asking questions because there is a long list of questions in the chat box. You should tell me how many are allowed and for how long can we go on like this, because I think Dr. Hema also needs to talk about, means we are awaiting her expert comments.
So ma'am, if you're okay with it and Dr. Nitin Gupta is okay with it and Hema agrees, maybe
Yeah.
she can give her comments and maybe also in this at the same time answer some of the questions in the chat box. Is that okay with Hema?
Yeah, totally fine.
So yeah, that's up to you guys then.
Right, so over to you, Dr. Hema, for your expert comments, and you can also deal with some of the questions.
Sure. Thank you. I think just to congratulate Anil, we go a long way back, and thank you, the organizers. We were together in Manipal, and it's like a party once again on a Friday night. So, at the outset, thank you. I think he gave a brilliant overview, and I hope there are mostly postgraduates listening to this very succinct lecture on this. Just one or two points mainly. I think there was recent publications. I mean, when I say recent, around July of 2020 and all, highlighting teratogenicity in terms of IQ, where this is all work from Liverpool, talking about how mothers registry. I think in our country where valproate is written left, right, and center, I feel that this weight gain, which Anil mentioned, and hair loss is huge. And I think other people would agree when we treat personality disorders, we already see somebody who's obese, who's potentially got PCOS, and who's on valproate for the cluster B personality disorders. And I think there, especially, we need to keep in mind what Anil was talking about in terms of the potential side effects. And I feel that I'm a big fan of lithium. So when Rukshada asked me about this opportunity, it would be nice. I know we don't have time, a head-to-head comparison between lithium, valproate, and now the new kid, endoxifen. But valproate, as the effects are so good, the side effects have to be. I mean, one take-home message is to monitor side effects. Two, I think there's one interesting question looking at comparing valproic acid and divalproex. Just to keep in mind that efficacy-wise it's similar, but valproic acid gets metabolized faster, and also the cost differences. So I don't think there's any specific condition. I think the question was, is there any indication in which you would choose valproic acid versus divalproex? But I think it is more to do with cost, and even worldwide, there have been reports saying that efficacy-wise, it's both the same. So one is that, and I wanted to just highlight the lamotrigine because I've had experience where, referred with rash and they are on combination. Another take-home message that lamotrigine increases valproate levels, and to keep in mind when you add it. And just slightly, I do give a lot. The loading dose concept is there, and like the classic advice is 20 milligram per kg body weight. And I think in mania, we can't start low and go slow, so we have to opt for the loading dose many of the time. So I just wanted to just reiterate that. I'll quickly look at the chat where
I think there are two things that you need to talk about when I look at the chat box is IV infusion, one. And secondly, if in pregnancy, and this, I think this dilemma all of us face in our practice is a patient who's maintained on valproate, now what should we do? These two questions definitely need attention from you.
Yeah. IV infusion, honestly, no idea. If there are other people who've had experience, I would clearly ask somebody else to answer that question. Valproate, a clear no-no. So if somebody is extremely doing well on valproate and planned pregnancy, pre-pregnancy counseling, but practical difficulty is people come back saying they're pregnant.
Yes, once they're pregnant.
So you stop it, oxcarb, very safe. And of course, or try an atypical like olanzapine. First 3 months, make sure you get the anomaly scan done for sure at 20 weeks. And then shift to, if let's say they relapse, then in the mid-trimester, even lithium is safe. So definitely no to valproate.
All right. Okay, I think since a long time, Dr. Philip John has raised his hand and I have not really asked him what he wants to say or comment or ask.
Good to have you, sir, Philip, sir.
Dr. Philip John, are you there?
Yeah, I am unmuted. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are very much.
Oh, I just wanted to talk about hyperammonia for a change.
Yes.
Basically, I would like to thank Dr. Anil for that exquisite presentation, which is brief, short, but touched all the points that should be touched, so that it gives us points to think about. Hyperammonia, unless you look for, you won't see, because most of the time, if you are seeing a depressive phase of bipolar illness, you might think that the complaint that the patient is raising may be related to the depressive episode or to other medications that you're using. There are two areas of concern. One is when you start a large dose, when you load a dose or large dose initially. Except in mania, I think we should start low and increase low. The other difficulty that we see is when we increase the dosage. We have found there was at a time we have published this. At a time we found 8 cases of hyperammonemia in 1 month, which is amazing. The problem about hyperammonia is it can kill if you don't recognize. And the beauty of treating hyperammonia is all you have to do is reduce the dosage or stop the drug for a few days, and that's it. L-carnitine, I don't know how effective it is. It is certainly not as effective as reducing the dosage. And for that, we need to actually have this in mind all the time when you start and when you raise the dosage. Thank you very much, Dr. Anil. And thanks a lot, Hema. It's a long time.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
Thank you, sir, for your expert comments. And well, there are 1 or 2 other questions. One is something that Dr. Kakunje has already touched upon, but any specific areas where sodium valproate, divalproex, or valproic acid are differentially preferred? Can you comment a little bit about that? And is sodium valproate better than divalproex?
I think I took that question. Like
yes, you took the question. You're right.
I just wanted to add about, I know our new, the bill doesn't talk about it, but surreptitious, I was hoping Anil would throw that into the mix about, we see sometimes so many families and the surreptitious valence solution is so hard, however much the companies vouch that it doesn't taste, invariably the patient finds out. And I think it's a real challenge because sometimes we need to give the mood stabilizer and there's no other liquid mood stabilizer like valproate. And I was honestly fascinated with Anil's topical valproate application. So that could be a later discussion for hair growth. And also wanted to end by saying this, dementia on paper, people do talk about not giving valproate and increased mortality in people with dementia. Practically, I think that in the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, many a times, again, a very low dose of sodium valproate helps. And so I'm looking, I wanted to just talk about indications other than what Anil had sort of highlighted. Again, once again, Anil, wonderful presentation. Over to you.
Okay.
Just to add, the cost factor, the plain preparations are much cheaper because they are out of patent. Divalproate tablets are almost double or triple the plain preparations. That is one. The other thing is plain preparations, the tolerability probably is much better. And because the size of the divalproate tablets are quite huge, especially the bigger ones. So 750,000 milligrams are quite big tablets. So there are people who want to look at the cost factor or say size of the tablet and so on. In such cases, probably the plain ones should work better because they are cheaper and the smaller tablets.
Okay, thank you. A lot of practical tips, a lot of ways of managing side effects, and I think it has been really an enriching session. And thank you for an excellent talk, Dr. Kakunje. Dr. Nitin Gupta, over to you for your comments, and then over to Rukshida. Thank you once again for inviting me today, and really a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few things to mention. One is that I think we talked about the formulations. there was an important formulation which had come up in the USA, that was Depakote. When it had come in India in 1995, Depakote had been made available, but I don't know how many of us here have used it, but it was withdrawn. Main reason was that it was very expensive. Depakote was a combination of sodium valproate and valproic acid in a ratio of 2:1. And it is the most effective form of the valproic acid or valproate formulations, because it was specifically developed for managing bipolar disorder. It was different in that way that it was not for treating epilepsy, actually. And I think that is one of the reasons why probably valproate has not been that efficacious and fell out of repute in terms of managing bipolar disorder. I'll just like to sort of touch upon here regarding the historical aspect of valproate, because there were only two proponents of valproate, Pope and Borden, in the early 90s in the USA. Because there was one question in relation to loading dose of valproate, which Dr. Tharoor also talked about regarding anybody has had experience with loading dose of use of valproate. I had used that during my early days. It was not available, obviously, in India in the IV form, but in terms of oral loading dosage, I had used it quite a lot, and it really used to work very well. Side effects were not very high, and in acute mania, it gave very good results. But unfortunately, as I said, that people didn't catch on to using valproate. Though I would still admit that, like Dr. Tharoor, I'm a hardcore fan of lithium, not of valproate. Even after more than a quarter of a century of practice, I would still vouch for lithium rather than any other mood stabilizer. But definitely, valproate has its own niche if it is used appropriately. Loading dose valproate definitely had a role to play. The reason why valproate probably fell out of repute was because it came only out of a select group of individuals who were carrying out research in the USA. They were able to push for FDA approval. It didn't catch on in the USA in the way other molecules were propagated, and that is why it never in that way caught the fancy. Although if one looks at the APA recommendations, valproate has a very high ranking compared to if you look at the Maudsley guidelines or any other guidelines which are there, even the RANZEP guidelines, etc. So that is one other point which I wanted to make. The other important thing which is there is, which Dr. Tharoor has mentioned, is about the weight gain. We tend to use off-license valproate quite a lot, especially where we are treating aggression, especially among people who have got quote-unquote personality disorders, especially where impulsivity is high or borderline personality disorders. It does not give very good results for treating the borderline personality disorders vis-a-vis carbamazepine. I mean, I'm saying from clinical experience, but also from studies which are being carried out, though they are far and few in between. But definitely weight gain does occur a lot with that. And especially as we know that in females, these problems are much more common. So one should be very prudent while prescribing valproate in such situations. Last comment regarding what Dr. Philip John also mentioned regarding treatment of hyperammonemia. I don't know why, but I mean, others can, what their experience is, but I think a simple use of lactulose is quite helpful in managing hyperammonemia rather than going for, if one has to necessarily use valproate. Because yes, valproate related hyperammonemia can be a life-threatening situation, but lactulose does tend to really treat that very well. rather than going for LCAR meeting. So that was another comment which I just wanted to make. But it's been a really enjoyable session, and thank you very much for making me part of it. So I hand over to Rukshita for her closing comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nitin Gupta. Thank you so much, Dr. Janvi Kidare. And a huge gratitude to Dr. Anil Kakunje and Dr. Hema Tharoor. At this point, it's a pleasure to invite our treasurer of IABP, Dr. Prasanjit Ghosh, who's joined in, and he would give a vote of thanks. Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Ruksheda. I, on behalf of the organizing committee, would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Anil Kakunje sir for such a brilliant and very informative presentation. I would also like to express our sincere thanks to our chairpersons, Dr. Nitin Gupta sir and Dr. Janvi Kidare madam, for their valuable inputs. Our sincere thanks to Dr. Pramod Kumar sir for his opening remarks. And our sincere thanks to Dr. Hema Tharoor madam for her expert comments. We are also very much thankful to all the participants for bringing so much interesting questions and making this CME a very interactive and a successful one. Our sincere thanks to our CME coordinators, Prasad Rao sir and Dr. Majid. Our sincere thanks to our corporate partner, Arena Life Science, for an unrestricted educational grant for this First Friday CME series. We are also thankful to all the office bearer, our President UC Garg sir, our Dynamic Secretary Dr. Ruksheda, and all others. And last but not the least, we are very much thankful to our office staff, Ms. Amita. With these few words, I hand over to Dr. Ruksheda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh. And we can close the session now. Thank you so much for being with us. The session will be on our YouTube channel in a few days, and I'm happy to share the link for that as well for broader viewing and more learning. Once again, thank you so much, everyone. Good night. Please take care of yourselves. Stay safe.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.